This is a little book that I love so much. It's called Something to Remember Me by. Oh, it was given to me by my mommy. It says, Because Grandmas Are Awesome, in June of 1998. This is a true story based on the author's relationship with and dedicated to her very dear grandmother, Eva Krawchuk. It is also a universal story that echoes the close bond between the illustrator's daughter and her grandmother, Kathleen Phillips. They have given us much to remember them by. They were special times. Every time the little girl visited her grandmother, the house smelled so good. Homemade soup and roast chicken and fresh baked cookies. The house was happy on sunny days and cozy on rainy days. It was always fun. The little girl could have a snack anytime she wanted. She could use the big box of crayons in the kitchen drawer to add drawings to the pad of clean white paper that was just for her. She could chatter about everything and ask questions by the dozen. And if she spilled her juice, her grandmother would just wipe it up, saying that accidents happen to little people and big people. Then her grandmother would smile a big, warm smile and give the little girl a warm, snuggly hug. The little girl visited her grandmother often. Her grandmother always had time to go for a walk or play a game of cards. Sometimes grandmother and granddaughter would do grocery shopping together. The little girl could choose whatever she wanted her grandmother to cook for dinner. Sometimes grandmother and granddaughter would get ready for a party for friends and relatives. The little girl would figure out exactly the right place to put each shiny spoon and knife and fork. Sometimes grandmother and granddaughter would water the garden at the back of the house, or pick beans, or pull carrots. And sometimes grandmother and granddaughter would just sit and watch television together. The grandmother would get an apple and a paring knife from the kitchen. Only big people could use the knife, she would tell her granddaughter. Then the grandmother would carefully peel the apple, letting strands of red fall to the napkin in her lap. She would cut the apple in half, dig out the core, and slice big wedges of the juicy fruit for the both of them to munch on. "You are the best grandma in the whole world," the little girl would say. The grandmother would smile a big, warm smile and give her granddaughter a warm, snuggly hug. At the end of one of the visits, the grandmother took her granddaughter's hand and led her into the bedroom. "I want to give you something to remember me by," the grandmother started. "Someday, that cedar chest at the foot of the bed will be yours. But for now, I want you to have this." She handed her granddaughter a wooden doll. It wore a pale yellow dress with white flowers on it. The painted face had bright red lips and big, wide-open eyes with long eyelashes. After that, many of the visits ended in the same way. Grandmother and granddaughter would go into the bedroom, and the grandmother would say exactly the same thing. "I want to give you something to remember me by. Someday, that cedar chest at the foot of the bed will be yours. But for now, I want you to have this." And then the grandmother would give her granddaughter this or that. As the girl grew, so did the number of things her grandmother gave her. A stuffed bear with soft white fur, a carved wooden flute, a china figurine of a boy and a small puppy, a shiny copper-colored coin with strange writing on it, a fancy pen that you had to use with special ink, a round gold watch on a thick chain, a silver picture frame, and a flowery orange and red and brown and blue tablecloth. That tablecloth was the one thing the girl thought was really ugly, but she took it and said thank you, as always. Once the girl asked why her grandmother gave her all these things to remember her by. The grandmother smiled a big, warm smile and gave her granddaughter a warm, snuggly hug. "Because everyone wants to be remembered," said the grandmother simply. The girl didn't quite understand. The girl grew up into a young woman. She moved far away, but she and her grandmother would talk on the phone often. This was very exciting for the grandmother. It was a long-distance call, and she didn't get many of those. The grandmother would listen all about the young woman's work and about her new family. She was so proud of her granddaughter. At the end of one telephone call, the grandmother told her granddaughter to watch for a package in the mail. The next week, a small box filled with tissue paper arrived. Nestled deep in the tissue was a hand-sewn cushion in the shape of a heart. It was stitched with big purple flowers, tiny pink flowers, and special lettering. There was a note with the cushion, "Something to remember me by." There came a day when the grandmother made an important long-distance call to her granddaughter. It was time to come and get the cedar chest The grandmother was moving out of her house. The grandmother couldn't take care of the house anymore. She couldn't see as well as she used to. She couldn't hear as well as she used to. Her hands didn't work as well as they used to. And she was getting forgetful. She couldn't remember some times and places and names. So the young woman came to get the cedar chest and to help her grandmother pack. When all the packing was done, the grandmother and granddaughter stood and looked at the empty house. The granddaughter was sad. The house was a very special place for her. The grandmother was sad too, but not about the house. It was time to leave the house. Something else was bothering her. "I'm worried," said the grandmother. "I'm forgetting too many things." "Everyone forgets things," responded her granddaughter reassuringly. "But," said the grandmother softly, "I'm scared that I'm going to forget you." The young woman was silent. She looked at her grandmother. She thought for a moment. The young woman reached over to the important boxes that her grandmother had insisted go with them in the car. She ripped the tape off the top of one box and rummaged through it. Finally, she found the photograph she was looking for, of grandmother and granddaughter. In big, bold letters, the granddaughter wrote both their names, on the back of the photograph. "Something to remember me by," said the young woman as she handed the photograph to her grandmother. The grandmother smiled a big, warm smile and gave her granddaughter a warm, snuggly hug. Time passed. The grandmother was very sick. The granddaughter traveled once again to see her. When the young woman walked into her grandmother's room, she expected a big, warm smile and a warm, snuggly hug like always. But there was only a blank look. "It's me, your granddaughter. It's me," repeated the young woman, not believing her grandmother wouldn't remember her. But the grandmother only looked confused. The young woman sat down by the bed. She talked to her grandmother while she was awake. She held her grandmother's hand when she fell asleep. The grandmother's hand was small and wrinkled, but it was soft and warm. The granddaughter stroked the hand and she whispered, "You're the best grandmother in the whole world." The grandmother opened her eyes, and then, for a moment, she smiled that big, warm smile. The grandmother turned her head toward the drawer beside the bed. The young woman opened the drawer. Inside was the old photograph of grandmother and granddaughter. The edges were tattered, and one corner of the photograph was bent. The writing on the back was smudged. The young woman went back to her home, her work, and her family. The cedar chest sat in her bedroom at the foot of the bed. The chest was filled with all the special things the grandmother had given her granddaughter. The young woman knelt beside the chest and opened it slowly. She looked through the contents. She could almost hear her grandmother's words, "I want to give you something to remember me by." But the young woman's heart really didn't need any of the things to remember her grandmother. Her grandmother had given her much more than would ever fit in the cedar chest. This is my favorite page. As the young woman looked up from the cedar chest, she noticed her reflection in the dresser mirror. She got up and went to the mirror. She looked closely. She looked for a long time. And then she smiled a big, warm smile. Her grandmother's smile. The end. Oh, I could not even get through that. Did not expect to cry that hard. I guess I really love my grandmas. And I love that Daisy loves her grandmas. Hope you guys have a good day. And maybe cry a little less than I do.